You walk into an Apple store thinking you'll spend 800 euros. 10 minutes later, you're holding a 1200 euros iPhone. And somehow, it feels reasonable. This is not an accident. And it's not manipulation either. It's pricing design. When people look at Apple's pricing, they usually think in binary terms. Cheap versus expensive. But Apple never prices in binary. They price in ranges. The goal of a range is not to force a decision. It is to make one option feel defensible. The base model feels risky. The top model feels expensive. The middle one just feels safe. In pricing, we call it comparative reference structure, or good, better, best. Not a trick, a way to organize choice. Now let's talk about price anchoring. Price anchoring is when the first price you see defines what feels expensive or cheap afterwards. Once again, price anchoring is when the first price you see defines what feels expensive or cheap afterwards. Once that reference is set, every other price is judged in relation to it, not on its own. Anchoring is often described as a psychological trick. In reality, it's a risk management tool. Apple shows you very high prices early on, not to scare you, but to normalize the idea that this category of product is expensive. Once that idea is accepted, the question is no longer, is this iPhone expensive? It becomes, which expensive option makes sense for me? Now, this is where Apple's pricing strategy becomes truly interesting. And if you enjoy this kind of analysis, you'll probably want to follow this channel and subscribe below. Because up to this point, you might think the decision is about which phone to buy. But from a pricing perspective, the phone itself is almost secondary. By the time you reach the configuration screen, if you're purchasing online, Apple has already done most of the work. And even if you're not going to buy right now, you've accepted the brand, the ecosystem, the idea that this phone is a long-term purchase. At that moment, the real pricing question is no longer, should I buy an iPhone? It becomes, which version would I regret not choosing? This is why Apple shifts the decision to trade-offs, not cheap versus expensive, but will I regret not having more storage? Will I regret choosing this phone in 4 years? Will I regret saving money today? From a pricing standpoint, this is extremely powerful. Let's talk storage. Technically, the difference for Apple is marginal, but Apple is not pricing the chips, the connectors, and the plastic parts that actually make their iPhones. They are pricing anxiety. Running out of space, losing photos, having to manage files. Those fears are not rational. And Apple will not try to ease them because they monetize them. And I don't say that in a judgmental way. This is often misunderstood. This is not about squeezing customers. It's about pricing what matters. Apple does not ask, how much does this component cost us? They ask, how painful would it be for the customer not to have it? Fun fact. Apple charges $100 for an extra 128 GB of storage. To put that in perspective, that's more expensive than buying actual gold by the gram for silicon that costs them less than your morning latte. That's value-based pricing. Not pricing features, pricing consequences. Another key element, pricing small steps. $100 here, $100 there. Individually, every decision feels reasonable, almost negligible. But pricing is cumulative. By the time you're done, you didn't make one big decision. You made 5 small ones. From a pricing expert's point of view, this is the real lesson. Apple does not win because they found customers that are willing to pay more. No, they win because their pricing removes uncertainty step by step until the final number feels justified. And once you understand that, you stop seeing Apple's prices as being high or low. You start seeing them as carefully structured decisions. Now, here's the part that most people miss. Apple's pricing works because it removes the fear of making the wrong decision. Customers don't buy the best option. They buy the option they can justify to themselves and to others. That's not psychology. That's pricing strategy. So yes, you probably didn't need the expensive iPhone, but you didn't buy it because Apple tricked you. You bought it because their pricing made the decision feel safe. And that's the real lesson here. Price is not a number. It's a way to reduce uncertainty. If you want to understand how this logic applies to B2B pricing, retail, or SaaS, that's what we explore here at the Pricing Club. I'll see you in the next video.